You have built a $14.8 million collection of small businesses, and nobody in the grocery store parking lot has any idea. You are sitting inside the same 12-year-old gray sedan you drove when this entire thing started. The leather on the steering wheel is worn down. There is an old notebook sitting on the passenger seat. The same notebook where, 20 years ago, you wrote down a strange idea that almost everyone would have ignored. Buy one small business every year. Not a technology startup. Not a company that would appear in magazines. Not something your friends would brag about owning. Small, forgotten businesses. The kind of businesses people drive past every single day without wondering who owns them. Laundromats, storage units, cleaning companies, equipment rental shops. Small service businesses with boring names and predictable customers. Your phone lights up. A monthly report arrives. Across all the companies, last month's owner distributions were $286,000. You stare at the number. Then you look up. A person walks past your car carrying groceries. They don't look twice. They don't know you employ 143 people. They don't know your business has processed thousands of transactions this month. They don't know that while most people spent 20 years climbing a ladder, you quietly spent 20 years buying pieces of the ladder. And the strangest part is, you don't feel different. There was no moment when everything changed. No celebration. No dramatic announcement. No single day when you suddenly became wealthy. It happened quietly. One decision at a time. One business at a time. 1 year at a time. But 20 years earlier, the first step looked almost embarrassingly small. You were sitting alone in a coffee shop on a Wednesday morning. Same corner table. Same black coffee. Same notebook. Except back then, the notebook was almost empty. Your bank account had $37,400. Not enough to feel rich. Just enough to start asking different questions. Every morning, you watched the same things happen. People bought coffee. Cars got repaired. Offices got cleaned. Packages got delivered. Everyone focused on the customers. But you started noticing something else. Behind every ordinary transaction, someone owned the machine. Someone owned the system collecting a tiny piece every time money moved. The coffee shop wasn't just coffee. It was leases, suppliers, employees, processes, margins. You started seeing an invisible layer behind normal life. The ownership layer. And once you noticed it, you couldn't stop seeing it. 6 months later, you bought your first business. A tiny commercial cleaning company. Purchase price, $92,000. You used $25,000 of your savings. The seller financed the rest. It had 5 employees, 22 clients, a messy spreadsheet, and a phone number customers had been calling for 14 years. The first month after paying expenses and debt, you made $312. $312. Less than some people spend on a weekend trip. But you kept looking at that number. Because the money wasn't the discovery. The proof was, customers paid when you weren't cleaning. Employees completed jobs when you weren't there. The business existed separately from your hours. For the first time, you understood something most people never experience. Income could be built, not just earned. That $312 was not money. It was evidence. A tiny crack in a much bigger door. The second year, you didn't search for something exciting. You searched for something reliable. You bought a small landscaping company for $140,000. Revenue, $310,000 a year. Profit, $55,000. Nothing about it looked impressive. Trucks, grass, schedules, maintenance contracts. But inside the boring details was something valuable. Predictability. You upgraded the scheduling system. Raised prices by 8%. Organized customer payments. 1 year later, the profit became $83,000. Not because you discovered something magical. Because small improvements multiplied across an existing system. By year 5, you own 5 businesses. Combined revenue, $3.2 million. Combined cash flow, $620,000. But the outside world saw nothing. Your friends talked about promotions, new titles, new offices, new cars. You talked about employee retention, insurance costs, customer acquisition, inventory mistakes, things nobody wanted to hear about. And that became the advantage. Everyone was competing for attention. You were collecting ownership. There were mistakes. The 7th business almost failed. You bought a small repair company for $430,000. The numbers looked good, but the systems existed only inside the founder's head. When he left, the company started breaking. Customers called asking for him. Employees waited for his decisions. Revenue dropped 22%. For the first time, you realized something important. You were not buying revenue. You were buying systems. A business dependent on one person wasn't a business. It was a job wearing a disguise. You wrote that sentence in your old notebook. Then you changed everything. Every company needed processes, managers, documentation, a way to operate without you. You stopped buying businesses. You started building a machine that improved businesses. And year by year, the machine got stronger. 15 years in, someone finally asks what you actually own. You show them. A cleaning company, 3 storage facilities, a plumbing business, a small manufacturing company, a few service companies, an equipment rental operation. They scroll through the numbers. $9.4 million in annual revenue. $2.1 million in yearly cash flow. They look confused. Then they say, "This is probably the most boring portfolio I've ever seen." You smile. Because you understand something they don't. That is the point. Exciting things attract competition. Boring things attract neglect. And neglect creates opportunity. Everyone wants the business people talk about. Very few people want the business people need. Nobody is impressed when a warehouse gets cleaned, until they realize thousands of warehouses need cleaning every single night. Nobody talks about replacement parts, until they realize machines cannot operate without them. Nobody notices ordinary businesses, until they see who owns them. The hidden advantage was never intelligence. It was patience, the ability to stay interested after everyone else got bored. You learned wealth often hides in places where status disappears, because status and returns are not the same thing. Attention pays in applause. Ownership pays in cash flow. And after enough time, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. At year 18, your life looks strangely normal. Same coffee shop, same order, same notebook. The numbers inside the notebook are different, but the routine is not. A new employee at one of your companies meets you for the first time. They see the old sedan, the simple clothes, the quiet personality. Later, you hear them ask someone, "So who actually owns this place?" The answer surprises them. You do. That moment stays with you, not because they underestimated you, but because you understand why they did. People are trained to recognize spending, not ownership. They recognize luxury, not leverage. They recognize the result, not the structure underneath it. Over 20 years, you watched people chase symbols of success. And slowly you realized, looking wealthy and becoming wealthy required opposite behaviors. One required money leaving. The other required money staying and multiplying. You missed certain conversations. You skipped certain purchases. You ignored certain trends. Not because you couldn't afford them, because you knew every dollar had a future version of itself. That patience came with a cost. Some people didn't understand your decisions. Some thought you were too careful. Some thought you were already successful and should finally start acting like it. But they only saw what you didn't buy. They never saw what you were building. Quiet decisions are hard to measure. Until years pass. Then suddenly they become impossible to ignore. 20 years after writing the first sentence in that notebook, you are back in the grocery store parking lot. Same sedan. Same notebook. Same person. Your phone shows the final report of the year. 20 businesses acquired. $42 million in combined annual revenue. $14.8 million estimated ownership value. Millions generated in cash flow. You look at the number again. Nothing happens. Nobody calls. Nobody knows. And strangely, that feels exactly right. Because the biggest change was never the number. It was how you saw the world. 20 years ago, you saw products. Now you see systems. You saw employees. Now you see teams. You saw businesses. Now you see thousands of tiny decisions stacked on top of each other. The world never changed. You just learned to see the layer underneath it. You close the notebook. Start the same old car. Drive home the same roads. The number changed. The person didn't. And maybe that is the quiet secret nobody tells you about building wealth. Money is not only about what you can buy. Sometimes it is about what you can build, who you become while building it, and whether you still recognize yourself when you finally have it.